Hello, and welcome to my walks with a camera. I gotta admit, we're in the month of December. I really haven't done much, photography-wise or video-wise. It isn't that I've run into a wall or anything, or haven't found that sense of creativity again. If anything, December's been a rather introspective time. And one of the things I've been thinking about is my YouTube channel, which has now been running since September 1st, so 4 months. And it started out partly as an experiment, partly as something that I'd fallen into. See, I'd been making videos and posting them on Facebook. There's a friend of mine, Tim Phelps, who actually talked me into making the leap to YouTube. And that took a long time. Mostly fear and sense of lack of confidence in talking on the camera and coming up with topics. I think I've pretty well defined what my channel is going to be about. I'm a photographer, but I'm also a history geek. And I enjoy photography immensely, and I enjoy history immensely. Both of which tell stories. History tells the stories about places, people, events, how we came to be. It asks that age-old question of who are we, where do we come from? And everybody has a story, regardless of where you are or what you do or your place in the world or where you live. There's always stories around those subjects. And those are the things that I've always been interested in. Now, I've been interested in history since I was 6 years old when my parents took me to Fort York in Toronto, which was built in 1792. And I just went, wow, because everything spoke to me. Everything told me their stories. Photography is somewhat different. It's something I came into late in life. I had been, at this point, a historic reenactor for 30 years. And I enjoyed historic reenacting because I could take the stories that I learned as a historian and present them to the general public in ways that the general public could understand. I also enjoyed the study of history. Now, to be fair, most historic reenacting is from a military point of view. And some people like that, and some people don't. They see it as glorifying war. But there is no glory in war. That's something that we convince ourselves that so that young men will go off and spill their blood on some foreign place, or in the case of Canada in the War of 1812, next door. But the interesting thing about that is, again, it tells stories about people, places, events, things like that. And photography allowed me to photograph, first, the historic reenactments I went to, but then it allowed me to photograph the places around where I live. And I'll show you some of the photographs I've taken this December. About a week ago on a Sunday, my wife and I went for a drive along the north shore of Lake Erie, from Port Dover to a small village called Normandale. And it's an area that we've both been through ad nauseum, and we know it quite well, to the point where at times it does get a little boring. But from a photography point of view, it allowed me to capture places that I'd photographed before, but because it's December, winter is set in, things are beginning to freeze, things are covered in snow, it it presented the story of that area between Port Dover and Normandale in a different way. And that's the interesting thing about photography. You can go to the same place over and over and over. But from an artistic point of view, every single time you go, you can see those differences. And they begin to stand out depending on the time of year, the season, the weather conditions. And they always present a different story. So my channel really combined those two interests of mine, photography and history. And I got to tell you, if you followed my channel, you know I like to go and read historic plaques. And Ontario is covered in them. And if they're blue, they've been put up by the Ontario government. If they're red, they're federal government. If they're brown, they're municipal governments have put them up. And they tell stories. They tell stories from the past. They tell stories where we came from. They tell stories about people. And they can be really, really interesting. And it's those things, my photography and those stories, that I wanted to showcase. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you look at the history of Ontario, it goes back hundreds of thousands of years, probably even millions of years, from when the earth was being developed and this area was either a volcanic soup or an ancient primeval lake. Fossils that you find buried in shorelines or in fields tell stories of past life that lived here 250 million years ago. And then when the First Nations people came and settled this entire area and this entire region and left their stories behind. When I was very young, and when I talk young was when I was, 11, 12, I spent 2 weeks at a camp which specialized in history, and I got to actually work on an archaeological dig. And it was one of my teachers from high school who'd organized it. And the dig was a fishing village. It would have been estimated maybe 1,000 years old. And what we were digging up was garbage pits. Nowadays, you drive past a garbage dump and you look at it, and apart from the smell, you go, ugh. Look at the seagulls, look at the Canadian geese flocking around it. What could be buried there? Time warp that ahead to a garbage pit that's used by First Nations people from 1,000 years ago, and what could be gone into it? Fish bones, animal bones, pottery, flint flakes, anything that's garbage that could no longer be used or recycled. And that garbage pit told a fascinating story. The pieces of pottery that we'd spent the day uncovering, pieces of flint. I remember I found a piece of a spine of a catfish. Food people had eaten. All told a story. And that's what I want to do with this channel. So I've now had it up for 4 months. And it's been very much an experiment. It's been very much a learning experience. And it's one that I've enjoyed immensely. And I hope that you have enjoyed it as well. Because everybody has a story. And everybody should tell their story. These are some of the photographs that I took when my wife and I were driving between Port Dover and Normandale on the north shore of Lake Erie. It's a fascinating area. Normandale started out as a small village settled by United Empire Loyalists. And during the early 19th century, it became a steel town because a guy there built a foundry. Now, there's no iron ore in the area, but there was bog iron because that area was part of the Black Swamp of Ontario. And eventually, Normandale as a steel producing area died out when it was replaced by Hamilton. It was replaced by imported iron and steel from the United States in the 19th century, and quite frankly, the bog iron petered out. Next to that town is a place called Port Ryerson. Port Ryerson is interesting. Port Ryerson is a little piece of New Jersey, because in the 1790s, a group led by Lieutenant Colonel Ryerson, who during the American Revolutionary War commanded the 4th Battalion New Jersey Volunteers, an American loyalist unit, came to what then was Upper Canada, received a land grant from John Graves Simcoe, and founded Port Ryerson. And next to that, a little to the east, is Port Dover, originally known as Dover Mills, because there were flour mills there and lumber mills. During the War of 1812, the Americans saw it as a strategic target and burned the town. It's also, in the 19th century, a fishing village. It had a large commercial fishing fleet. Fishing boats still work out of it. Not as many, but there are a few. And it's a fascinating area. There's 3 small communities, each one with its own story on the north shore of Lake Erie. And we haven't even touched on the First Nations stories, the people that lived before whites came, and they lived on the north shore of Lake Erie. The Cree, the Petun, the Neutral, the Tobacco people, all they have their own stories as well. These are things I want to tell on the channel, apart from showcasing my photography of the places I visit. So the first 4 months has been me going through that growth and trying to figure out what works and what you folks would like to hear and would like to see. And I hope you do. In the meantime, here are the photographs I took a week ago. The trip my wife and I took from Port Dover to Normandale. Enjoy. So that's the north shore of Lake Erie. An interesting little place to drive along. There's a nice scenic road. These little communities all have stories. So for 2026, I hope to bring you those stories, my travels around Ontario, and I hope to photograph them and bring them to you. One of the things I've been rather reluctant to do is ask people to subscribe to my channel. And it's partly absent-mindedness, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, I'm reluctant, but I also forget. So if you like what you see, if you like what I present, and if it interests you, give me a like, maybe subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. In the meantime, 2026, it's always going to be a good year. Take care, and cheers. Till next time.